Hello viewers, I'm your host Uzma Jaffrey with another episode of South Asia Focus. Let's begin the show. As the January summit of the World Economic Forum gets postponed due to the spread of Omicron Coronavirus variant, the virtual event witnessed a host of issues being put forth by leaders from across the world. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi largely focused on cryptocurrencies, which he said were required to be dealt with a cautious outlook and a unified approach. He also said that there was an urgent need to improve the supply chain that has been affected by the pandemic, and India is ready to provide all assistance in bringing the global economy back on track.
In a virtual event of the World Economic Forum last week, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the global economy had hit major roadblocks owing to the pandemic, and all countries were required to work in coherence to deal with affected supply chains, inflation, and climate change. He also emphasized only a collective effort could deal with the problems posed by cryptocurrencies. India has been mulling virtual currency-related regulations that were widely expected to be introduced in the winter session of the Parliament in December before being shelved.
ये सप्लाई चेन के डिसरप्शन, इन्फ्लेशन और क्लाइमेट चेंज इन्हीं के उदाहरण है। एक और उदाहरण है क्रिप्टो करेंसी का। जिस तरह की टेक्नोलॉजी इससे जुड़ी है, उसमें किसी एक देश द्वारा लिए गए फैसले इसकी चुनौतियों से निपटने में अपर्याप्त होंगे। हमें एक समान सोच रखनी होगी।
New Delhi has previously flagged that it plans to ban most cryptocurrencies, a move that would follow recent measures by China that intensified its crackdown on cryptocurrencies. India's central bank has also voiced serious concerns around digital currencies, saying that they may impact financial stability. There are an estimated 15 million to 20 million cryptocurrency investors in India, with total crypto holdings of around $5.39 billion, according to industry estimates. Modi also said that New Delhi was working on removing trade barriers across the world and was in negotiations with several countries for signing the free trade agreements.
भारत ने आईटी सेक्टर और बीपीओ से जुड़े आउटडेटेड टेलीकॉम रेगुलेशंस में बड़े रिफॉर्म्स किए। साथियों, भारत ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन्स में विश्व का एक भरोसेमंद पार्टनर बनने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। हम अनेक देशों के साथ फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट के रास्ते बना रहे हैं।
India recently announced a start of free trade talks with Britain with the intent of signing a deal by the end of this year. The Prime Minister also said that it was the best time to invest in India because the country was willing to become a more trusted partner in the global supply chain.
छह लाख से ज्यादा गांवों को ऑप्टिकल फाइबर से कनेक्ट किया जा रहा है। विशेष रूप से कनेक्टिविटी से जुड़े इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर $1.3 ट्रिलियन का इन्वेस्टमेंट किया जा रहा है। एसेट मोनेटाइजेशन जैसे इनोवेटिव फाइनेंसिंग टूल्स में $80 बिलियन जनरेट करने का लक्ष्य रखा गया है। डेवलपमेंट के लिए हर स्टेक होल्डर को एक ही प्लेटफॉर्म पर लाने के लिए
The pandemic has severely affected the global economy, and each country is endeavoring its own manner for the recovery. Only 1 in 10 World Economic Forum members surveyed expects the global recovery to accelerate over the next 3 years. A poll of nearly 1,000 business, government and academic leaders found with only 1 in 6 optimistic about the world outlook. The World Economic Forum's latest report highlights 4 areas of emerging risk: cybersecurity, a disorderly climate transition, migration pressures, and competition in space. The report is published each year ahead of the annual WEF meeting in Davos. However, the Geneva-based WEF last month postponed the January event until mid-2022 due to the spread of the Omicron Coronavirus variant.
Moving on. Nepal is witnessing a health staff crisis amidst rising infections in the hospitals. Driven by the Omicron variant, the caseload has increased by 10 times in the first 3 weeks of this month, and many healthcare workers and doctors have contracted the infection. Previous waves had strained the health system of the country, and there are apprehensions that this wave too can deal a heavy blow. The government has several measures to contain the spread, but that hasn't proved effective enough in flattening the curve in past few days.
As the third wave of COVID-19 rages across Nepal, the capital city of Kathmandu is witnessing long queues of frontline workers getting themselves tested for the infection. Over 500 doctors and healthcare workers have contracted the infection in just 1 week, putting a further strain on the health system of the country. In view of these infections causing staff crunch at hospitals, the government has reduced the isolation period to 5 days. Many others have been isolated at home in order to provide more admission space to common citizens.
I think this third wave is going to bring human resources cry a lot, because a lot of healthcare workers are getting infected day by day. If you look into the data, as you know, bigger hospitals of Nepal like Bir Hospital, Teaching Hospital, more than hundreds of healthcare workers are getting infected. So once they have to go for isolations, we will not be having adequate amount of healthcare workers to take care of the patients.
Some regional and district hospitals outside Kathmandu Valley too have been hit hard by the infection amongst healthcare workers. Many districts have reportedly been forced to shut operations partially thanks to the limited staff after most of them contracted COVID. The Bharatpura Hospital in Chitwan district, considered as one of the prime locations hosting large number of doctors and medical students, has also isolated majority of its staff. In Nepal, even before the COVID pandemic, the number of human resources stood very less against the population. When the country's population stood at 1 million, there were only 1,300 doctors in the country, and despite a threefold increase in the population, the number of doctors remains the same.
In Nepal, even when there was not COVID, the number of human resources were very less as per the population. Even if you look into the government side, when the population of Nepal was 1 crore, we only had 1,300 doctors in government sides. And when the population of Nepal was 3 crore, when the Nepal population is 3 crore right now, the number of doctors of government doctors are only 1,300. So there is no increment in the number of doctors in the government side. So now during COVID, the gap between the populations and these doctors has increased more, because people are getting infected more and more, and we have the same number of human resources.
The current positivity rate of the country is at grim 45%, and Kathmandu doesn't seem to have a contingency plan if the physicians are hit even harder in coming times. In such a scenario, it is not left with many options but to follow the standard protocol of containing the spread: the lockdowns, immunization, and now the booster doses. Its economy was severely hit last time around, and the daily infection graph seems to suggest a repeat of the same in coming weeks.
Moving on. The Taliban, who have so far failed to persuade anybody around the world, have appealed to the governments to legitimize their administration. Acting Prime Minister Mullah Mohammad Hasan Akhund, who held a press conference with UN officials present in the audience, said that the conditions they were asked to meet in the peace process have already been met and they deserve to be part of the international mainstream. However, the Taliban claims do not seem to align with what is transpiring at the ground, as not only the ordinary Afghans are reeling under a collapsing economy, but the women who have remained the center of discussion during the entire political debate are finding both their sustenance and civil rights under an everyday expanding crackdown.
The Taliban have urged the international community to recognize them and treat them at par with other sovereign countries. Mullah Mohammad Hasan Akhund, the acting Prime Minister, and other Taliban administration officials also appealed for a loosening of restrictions on money into the country, blaming freezing of funds the primary reason behind an impending economic collapse. The appeal comes as the country faces a cash crunch and a deteriorating economy pushes millions into poverty in the harsh winter.
امارت اسلامی په خپلو سختو قربانیو سره داسې یو فضا په دې ملک کې راوستل چې امن راغلی د بې امنیتۍ پر ځای د خلکو کورونه ناموسونه عیال مال ټول محفوظ شول فساد ورک شو خیانت ورک شو اختطاف ورک شو.
The international community has already ramped up humanitarian aid designed to address urgent needs and largely bypass official channels. And this appeal follows the Taliban's demand of playing an active role in the distribution of the international aid promised by the United Nations and the US. The ground reality, however, doesn't confirm the claims of Taliban, who say all the evils in the society were present only during the previous regime and they have disappeared with them at the helm of affairs. In a small tailoring workshop in Kabul, 29-year-old Afghan entrepreneur Sohaila Noori looks on as her dramatically reduced workforce of around 30 women sew scarves, dresses and baby clothes. A few months ago, before the hardline Islamist Taliban movement seized power in August, she employed more than 80 people, mostly women, across 3 different textile workshops.
فعلا ما به تعداد 30 نفر هستیم داخل کارگاه کار میکنیم 10 نفر استاد کار هستن و دیگه به حساب طالبان و از روزی که طالبان آمدن کار ما نظر به سابق کمتر شده.
With Afghanistan's economy deep in crisis, billions of dollars in aid and reserves have been cut off and ordinary people have little money even for basics. Enterprises like Noori's are struggling to stay afloat. Making matters worse, the Taliban will only allow women to work subject to their interpretation of Islamic law, prompting some to leave jobs out of fear of punishment by a group that severely restricted their freedom the last time it ruled. Hard-won gains in women's rights over the last 2 decades have been quickly reversed, and reports from international rights experts and labor organizations this week painted a bleak picture for female employment and access to public space. Though the economic crisis is hitting the entire country, Some agencies predict it will leave almost the entire population in poverty in the coming months. The effect is disproportionately felt by women.
سابق ما زیاد کار داشتیم، قراردادیا داشتیم، بدون از اجور دوزی زیاد داشتیم، میتونستیم به استادا معاش بدیم، برای همکارای ما کار میکردن معاش بدیم. فعلا همون نیست.
Afghan women's employment levels fell by an estimated 16% in the third quarter of 2021, according to a report released by the International Labour Organization for Afghanistan, on relative to 6% for men. According to the Labour Organization, women's employment was expected to be 21% lower than it was before the Taliban takeover by mid-2022 if current conditions continued. Amid all this, it appears highly unlikely that Taliban are getting any extraordinary concessions from the international community, let alone the recognition of a legitimate government.
Time now for Asia This Week, the stories from across the continent.
Manila's local government opened up its zoo past week as a vaccination center for minors and the elderly. It is being used as a means of encouraging them to get vaccinated while being entertained by animals. 1,000 COVID-19 injections will be allocated per day for minors aged 12 to 17 years old and senior citizens, according to authorities. Daily coronavirus infections have hit record several times in the Philippines this month, driven by the highly contagious Omicron variant, prompting a tightening of mobility curbs. The country has so far fully inoculated half of its population, but many areas outside the capital region are lagging behind. Local residents and Iraqis from across the country gathered in public parks in the northern town of Suleimania to enjoy the snow that blanketed the Kurdish town. Schools and public institutions remain closed in the city due to the difficult transport conditions, allowing children to spend time outdoors, build snowmen and hold snowball fights. The city centre had not witnessed such snowfall in years. Snow usually falls in the mountains surrounding the city during winter. Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station has to inevitably discharge advanced liquid processing system treated water into the sea. Professor Tadashi Narabayashi is an expert of nuclear engineering.
溶融したデブリ等にですね触れることによっていろいろな核物質がですね地下水に溶け込んできてます。これらのものはですね科学的な処理をすることによってほぼ問題ないレベルまで取り除くことができています。いろいろな膜を使ったり薬品処理をしたり、最終的にはこの ALPS という装置で処理をしました。この ALPS で処理したものを処理水というふうに呼んでおります。敷地の中にですね約1000基を超えるタンクがございまして、125万立方メーターの汚染水がございます。これは処理してあればトリチウム以外は取り除かれていると。このトリチウムなんですけども、例えばですねプールの中に目薬を一滴ポトンと落としたくらいのその濃さなんですね。
Fukushima Power Station's future is a huge global concern. Decommissioning should be done carefully while referring to the opinions of experts and other cases in the world. Tokyo Electric Power Company or TEPCO is progressing its plan to discharge advanced liquid processing system treated water into the sea from its Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station in the near future. The water contains tritium which cannot be removed. How does the diluted ALPS treated water impact the human body? The experts explain it.
放射線の影響っていうのはもう濃度に依存してきますから、そういう意味では他の各種の影響は、ほぼ除くことができて、トリチウムの影響だけを考えればいいという状況に、処理水の段階ではできるというふうに判断をしています。今の自然界にあるトリチウムの総量と比べれば、やっぱり3桁4桁低い量のトリチウムを放出するかどうかという判断を我々はしたというふうに理解をしています。体の中のトリチウムの量がこの放出によって変わるということは起こり得ないということで、生態的な影響もこのレベルであれば考えられないというふうに理解できるかと思います。
The experts argue that discharging ALPS-treated water into the sea is safe. To moving forward, establishing mutual understanding among various stakeholders to protect harmful reputation is most important. It is the certain path to decommissioning.
Moving on. Devotees in Nepal thronged Triveni Ghat, the confluence of rivers Punyamati, Leelavati and Rudravati near capital Kathmandu, to mark the beginning of the month-long religious festival Makar Mela. The Makar Mela happens only once every 12 years and witnesses the attendance of millions of pilgrims from around the country, neighbouring India and rest of the world. As management became tough owing to the spread of the new variant of coronavirus, the devotees fell in line with the restrictions imposed by the administration and held their customs in a peaceful and safe manner.
Thousands of devotees gathered at the bank of a confluence of holy rivers Punyamati, Leelavati and Rudravati near the capital city Kathmandu last week at the beginning of Makar Mela, a religious fair. The crowds were comparatively thin because of coronavirus restrictions and fear of rising cases. An estimated 20 to 30,000 people visited the sacred place on the first day of the fair. According to local religious beliefs, taking a dip in the confluence of holy rivers during the Makar Mela washes away all sins and cures skin diseases.
कोरोनाको जुन एउटा मेसेज आयो त्यसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ हल्का कम होला कि भन्ने चाहिँ आश लिएका छौं तर यो मकर मेला यो जस्तै धर्म संस्कृति भनेपछि चाहिँ मान्छेहरु एक पाइला अगाडि भएकोले चाहिँ अझ अलि बढी नै होला कि भन्ने चाहिँ हामीले अनुमान गरेका छौं यो चाहिँ के हुन्छ त भन्दाखेरि तपाईको थ्रो हुँदै जान्छ र एवं प्रकारले चाहिँ यो भिडहरु बढ्दै जान्छ त्यसको लागि चाहिँ हामीले सबै सुरक्षित कार्य चाहिँ जुन जसै धर्मावलम्बीहरु आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ सुरक्षा दिन सकिन्छ त्यो कार्यहरुको लागि चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ अलरेडी तयारी भएर तपाईले देखिराख्नु भएको छ प्रहरी साथीहरु पनि सबै ठाउँ-ठाउँमा चाहिँ हामीले परिचालन गरिसकेका छौं।
The Makar Mela that happens only once every 12 years has officially started on 15 January and will culminate after nearly 1 month of celebration on 12th of February. The festival attracts Hindu pilgrims from all over Nepal, India and even some foreign tourists. Despite the spread of the Omicron variant, the festival is expected to see 6 million pilgrims from Nepal and India. With the onset of the festival, the management committee marks and builds areas for men and women to take a dip in the holy river. The areas are separated with bamboo sticks. They place sandbags to create a makeshift dam that prevents the polluted water from polluting the makeshift sections.
Makar Mela, which is held here, is actually the resemblance of the Kumbh Mela held every 3 years in Allahabad. So here, in every 12 years, it's told to be the Sangam of 3 rivers, namely the Rudravati, Leelavati and the Punyamati. So Punyamati and the Rudravati are being surgically seen, whereas the Rudravati come from the underground source. And there is something called a Mulkunda here, where these 3 rivers meet, and it is called a Sangam.
During the festival, pilgrims offer rice, flowers, vermilion powder, incense sticks and butter lamp. These 5 items represent 5 human life supporting elements such as earth, water, air, light and mind.
The festival starts when the sun enters Makar Rashi or the Capricorn as per the Vedic astrology. With that, we come to the end of this week's episode. See you next week. Goodbye and take care.